Welcome, everybody to Eye on Privacy with TRU Staffing Partners. I am Jared Coseglia. I am the founder and CEO of TRU Staffing Partners, and we specialize in data privacy, cybersecurity, e-discovery, and AI legal staffing. Yes, we're adding that to the mix for those of you that are new to our session. We're so excited to have you here today. It's the end of August. It's the end of the summer, but it's the beginning of what we think will be the busiest hiring season for data privacy professionals since probably the Great Resignation. As always, I'm joined by a special guest host, and joining me today is the incredible Robin Andruss. Robin comes from great privacy fame legacy of Google and Twilio and Yahoo, and is now the Chief Privacy Officer at Skyflow. Robin's been doing privacy longer than I could spell privacy. We're so excited to have Robin here with us today. Robin, say hi to all of our viewers and constituents today, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Jared. Thanks, everyone. I'm excited to be here. Like Jared said, I've been in privacy for a long time, even before I remember that TRU Staffing existed. And I remember when you kind of came out and really started focusing on helping us find good candidates as hiring managers and just really understanding the industry. So I'm looking forward to being here today.
And we can't wait to hear all of your insight on our monthly metrics. For those of you that have been to the show, you know what we do every month. For those of you that are new, here are some of the things that we're tracking on a regular, ongoing basis here at TRU Staffing Partners to provide the community with statistical intelligence and some anecdotal intelligence too on what's happening in the job market and how the job market is behaving. So if you have questions, we want to answer them. You can put them in the Q&A, not the chat. And if you want to meet us at TRU and hear more of what we have to say, we literally have the busiest roster of events that I think we have all year long over the next 5 to 6 weeks. So after Labor Day, you can join us and our partners at the IAPP for Evolving Jobs in Privacy and AI. That's on September 10th. We're going to be in California. Jess Barr and Sarah Roberts on my team are SVPs. September 11th and 12th at the Future of Privacy Forum's inaugural California kickoff event. We're going to be working with Jody Daniels on our Eye on Privacy September 17th. The 18th, we've got an AI special webinar presentation with Transcend that we'll be doing quarterly. And of course, you can come see me speak with Ruby Zeffo and a number of other people over at PSR in September. Robin, are you going to be at PSR in Los Angeles at the end of September?
I will, for sure. Looking forward to seeing you all there.
Amazing. Are you speaking or are you just
Nope, I'm
up,
actually
getting some
excited not to be
education?
speaking. Yep.
I'm a little jealous. I'm not going to lie. It takes the pressure
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see you there. I'll see everybody there. And with no further ado, let's jump right into what is happening now and what are the trends in the data privacy job market. So you'll see here when we get to speed of hire, not a lot of hiring. And Robin and I were just talking about this before we kicked off the webinar today, that the CPO job market remains very still, if not stagnant, and has been quiet now for almost 24 months. So really since the beginning of the fourth quarter in 2022, that's when the NASDAQ crashed and went back to pre-pandemic lows. That's when we started to think we would go into a recession. That's when we started to see jobs in corporate America pull back, and we haven't seen very much movement for CPOs. There's been a sprinkling, but not a lot, and certainly not for experienced CPOs. And Robin, you're one of the few, that are out there. You're a CPO. Are you seeing a lot out there in terms of CPOs, or does this sort of match and validate what we're tracking out in the marketplace in terms of the amount of movement that maybe we have seen for CPOs in years past? I'm thinking like, mid 18 post GDPR and even in the years right after the pandemic during the Great Resignation.
Yeah, I would agree with you on this. I mean, it also might be companies, we talked about this a little bit, like realizing what they really need, like what jobs to be done they need within the organization. And maybe, a CISO is learning more about privacy and it's coming under them, or someone else is taking on the role and responsibility. So we'll see what happens, because I mean, I do see privacy becoming more and more of a critical area that companies do need to worry about, and making sure they're putting kind of the budget and the money beside.
Agreed. And one of the things I know, Robin, you mentioned before we hopped on this call, you had the observation that Apple is no longer calling it a chief privacy officer. Their highest ranking privacy official is the head of privacy from a titling perspective. Keith Enright is departing Google. The understanding I have is that there is no intent to replace him at the chief level. And, it begs these other questions of as we move into privacy professionals and leaders taking on more AI and AI governance, how important is having that C in the title? We're going to come back to that question later in the program. One of the other trends we're noticing, Robin, is FTE roles are increasingly advertised, but less frequently filled. And that is relative to the amount of contract roles that we're seeing not advertised, but regularly filled. There's a bit of a dissonance here. And I know a lot of it is this emerging trend, and we've been trying to suss the wheat from the chaff here of jobs that are real and jobs that are not real. There are definitely a lot of people using mechanisms like LinkedIn. There's a great article in the New York Times. I think we put it up in last month's channel about fake job postings contributing about 20% of what's available online, that there is actually no intent to hire. I don't think that that's so much what we're seeing here, but rather the speed at which people are moving on hiring full-time is some of the slowest I've ever seen in my entire career, pre or post pandemic. And though there are a lot of jobs being advertised, they're not getting filled for a variety of reasons. And Robin, I'm interested in your perspective and why you think that is.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there was definitely during the 2020 to 2022 era, there was a lot of hiring that happened really fast. And then as we know in the privacy industry, there were a lot of layoffs. It takes a lot to really hire a team and hire the right people. And, I think it's smart in a way that it's smart that people are really taking their time to hire the right candidate and find the right candidate. And like, where using like maybe versus hiring a FTE, using like, hey, maybe we don't need a full-time person to do this. Where can we augment with like contract help? Let's say to become compliant with different state laws that have come out, or someone who needs to update the ROPA or roll out privacy training. So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's, good to think about really as you're either a candidate or a hiring manager, like, really hiring someone that can stay the long term.
Robin, you were been a hiring manager during what we'll call the Great Resignation years, 21, 22, and now after and before, quite frankly.
Yep.
How do you approach hiring differently now than you did during the Great Resignation? Are there just key differences, key pressures that you feel differently as a leader from the top down to the bottom up, key opportunism that you pay closer attention to now because it's a very different market? Can you help our listeners sort of understand the perspective of a hiring manager then versus now and how it's different?
I mean, I've been in this space for a while, and I've always kind of just in general believed in like, both like hiring and then look, in my roles, like going somewhere, to the people I want to work with an interesting role. Obviously, good compensation, finding kind of the right fit for me and not just rushing. Um, and so I felt, when you're hiring a lot of people in a very quick time and you're really trying to ramp up quickly, sometimes you don't always take into account all those considerations.
And Robin, have you in your career hired contractors and then converted them into direct hires?
I have, yes.
And what would you say are the things that you're looking for to make that decision to convert a contractor?
Yeah, and I won't say it's actually pretty difficult. The nice thing is now that it is hard to hire someone with absolutely no privacy experience while you're trying to fly the plane, and ramp them up with privacy. So the nice thing about doing, there are a lot more candidates now in 2024 than like 2019 when I started to kind of hire more contractors. Um, consideration is kind of like the job to be done, right? So if you think about like, just go sit down with your team, think of all the things that need to be done over the next year, right? And think about what you could also get off your plate. So something like privacy training is, for example, what I had executed on building a privacy training and rolled it out for the entire company. And we had a playbook on how to do that. So that's something I could have someone come in with transferable skills, eager to learn, come in and roll that out. Now, something a little more complicated, like working with the business on privacy engineering or privacy guidance, that's something like you wouldn't want just to bring a contractor in. And then, converting a contractor is obviously working with them on their performance, making sure they're kind of learning the subject matter, making sure they're a fit for the organization. And then it's nice because you've kind of worked with this person versus just, interviewed them for a couple hours. So, and, through that, I've actually been able to kind of train and teach some people in privacy and learn kind of the ropes in privacy.
We're just seeing that and this trend is starting to wane a little bit, but in June and July, we saw more of our contractors get converted and get full-time jobs than hiring managers that actually pulled the trigger on a net new full-time hire. So the road to full-time employment might actually be straightest through a contract than it is by applying to jobs online, purely from a temporal perspective, right? And we'll get into some of those specific numbers. I think the number is up to like 240 something for days of conversion before a contractor in 2024 is being offered a conversion. I think in 2023 it was 223 days. So, a little more than half the year, and they're making that decision, or they lose them, right? That's the other metric we're tracking too, is if you wait much longer than 260 days, chances are somebody else is going to come and grab your contractor from you and benefit from the training that you've given them. And we're seeing a lot of contractors are getting full-time jobs. It used to be this stigma, right? I remember 15, 20 years ago where people thought, oh, if I take a couple of contracts back to back for a few years, I'll never get a full-time job again. People will think nobody wants to hire me. And the opposite is sort of the reality in privacy in 2024, where somebody who's moved around a little bit, seen some different things, experienced some different tools or processes or industry verticals, has a more diversified set of experiences that they can leverage from or use from them in more of a ad hoc toolbox kind of way, becomes really valuable asset to a lot of job seekers. And so we sort of wanted to dispel that old school myth and point to just how much success our contractors are having getting those really sought after full-time jobs. We've mentioned this last bit before, which is full-time speed of hires at an all-time slow. And we're going to give you the exact metrics on that in just a second. And fully remote work in privacy is now 90% contract work. That means only 10% of the FTE direct hire jobs that we receive are 100% remote. The rest have some hybrid component. So unlike what we're experiencing, quite frankly, in cybersecurity and e-discovery, the data privacy community, where more of the jobs rest inside corporate America and not at consulting firms, vendors, or law firms, for the most part, compared to cyber and ESI, tend to want you at an office at some point during the week, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 days. So that's a big change, right? That it's more of a return to a normalization of pre-pandemic patterns, not fully in the office, but more in that 2 to 3 day a week. And Robin, I see you have a thought.
No, I actually don't. Keep going. Yeah. No, my one thought was that it is a little surprising that you said more law firm jobs in e-discovery and consulting jobs in e-discovery and cybersecurity, because it feels like there's a lot of privacy consultings out there, consulting jobs and consultants at the consulting firms and law firms as well. So that was just surprising to me. So that was all.
Relative to
Yeah.
corporate, in terms of sheer volume, it's about a 75 to 25 corporate America privacy to consulting firm, software company on law firm on privacy. Part of that is more historical over the last 24 months. As the economy has recessed, we've seen less of an investment from consulting firms to bolster their staff, less of an investment from law firms to bring in operational talent that's non-legal billing at a higher rate. Whereas the years prior, in like 18, 19, getting ready for GDPR, people were leaning in on their law firms to do all sorts of things beyond pure legal work. They were staffing up, whether contract or full-time. That all sort of stopped when the economy went into a theoretical recession, even though it feels like a soft landing, knock on wood, that we're in and going to continue to be in right now. We've got a great question here from James. Does this trend, it's going back to the FTE contract conversation we're having, does this trend suggest an FTE candidate should consider leaving an FTE role for a contract gig just to get access to another full-time role versus a lateral or upward move. And let me comment on that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, Robin. I think the word that's wrong in this question is gig, because the way people are using contractors now isn't necessarily gig oriented. It can be, right? We can talk about impact projects. We're rolling out a new technology. We need to build privacy by design into that. I need a privacy engineer who can help with that, translate between the lawyer and the tech team, maybe, write a little code, but maybe not. That's going to take us 3 to 6 months, and then they're out. We're moving into Latin America. I need a lawyer that understands the regulatory environment in that jurisdiction and can help educate some of our existing team, and then I phase them out. But a lot of our customers are now saying, I need a lot of things done, and I need somebody that can do 3 to 4 of these 8 things. I can teach them some of the things they don't know, but I need them to be able to immediately start doing these things. Maybe I've got 20 hours a week worth of work, maybe 40, we'll see. But can you give me somebody that can immediately alleviate some of the pressures? Jess Barr on my team always uses the pressure release valve metaphor, right? Like, where is there the most pressure building where I can bring a contract in to release some of that pressure, alleviate the burnout on my FTE employees, add value with immediate impact, and then maybe begin making the case that this is a person we want to keep forever because they have institutional knowledge. They've now worked with us for 3 to 6 months. One of the things I think you've got to consider here is people are not just looking to solve an immediate problem all the time. They're now considering, how do I integrate contract staffing strategies and contract to hire strategies into my privacy program hiring strategy long term? And they didn't used to think that way, as Robin said, because the talent wasn't available 5 years ago for them to think that way. And now it is. And so that changes the way you have to maneuver. Robin.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot of the, I feel like you are probably closer to the pulse of what's really going on in that market, like the contract to hire. But I can say, as a hiring manager, thinking about every company is completely different, right? So some you might just have a budget for operation expenses, and like they will not, and you cannot get a budget to hire someone full time, and you
Right.
need something to be done. And then you end up hiring a person and they're excellent. And then the budget opens up the next year. The budget could shrink and you could lose the headcount next year. So I think it really is company dependent and specific. I mean, this is where I would kind of lean on TRU Staffing if I was in that sort of position and say, like, hey, like, is this a company that frequently converts contractors or says you're here and then you're gone after X number? Um,
Correct.
so that's where I would more lean on, like, kind of your expertise being kind of the eyes and ears of the market.
And it is very different from company to company, just as you said.
Yeah.
We've got some contractors that have been on my payroll for 5 years, and they don't want to convert into full-time employees because they get better benefits from us than they probably would, and better cash compensation than they may if they convert, right? A lot of times people can't convert them because they want them to take less money than they're making as contractors, and it doesn't
Mhm.
always work out. Sometimes that means they become perpetual contractors, and everybody's fine with that arrangement. We have a lot of people in that modality that work for our business. All right, I want to move on to the facts and figures and stats. Here's speed of hire. We've been tracking it now since what we consider to be sort of the end of the Great Resignation at Q4 2022. Here's your executive timeline. It's now taking almost 180 days for an executive, and generally these are roles at the C-suite level. For program managers and directors, you see the summer malaise took us from about 60 days to now an 80-day cycle. If we move on to privacy engineers, we went from 55 to 70. If we move on to attorneys, we went from 35 to 50, and analysts, we went from 35 to 45, and the contractors, we went from 6 to 7. So these numbers here for where we are at year-to-date Q3 is the slowest the market has behaved in terms of hiring managers making decisions all year long. As I wrote in the opening of our weekly Hot Jobs newsletter, we're experiencing what we used to experience in the 90s and early 2000s, which is everybody sort of takes the summer off. And that's exactly what happened this summer in privacy. People took the summer off or took their sweet time making decisions about pulling the trigger on extending offers, which is why all these timelines are now extended. That's all about to change. Now we take a look at privacy contract versus direct hire. And this is, I think, really interesting. We've added up and down arrows so people could see where we were relative to last month. We're tracking year to date in 24. And we actually saw the number of contract roles go up from 60 to 67, and year to date go down from 40 to 33%. We're just seeing these full-time jobs. Yeah, they're out there, but people aren't taking them. They're being reposted. They're being re-advertised because people are taking a really long time. And Robin, this is maybe the antithetical perspective to it's good to take your time and make sure you make the right hire. Don't let that make you doubt your gut instincts when you meet someone you think is fantastic, because I've got a number of customers who are in this position right now. We really love so and so, but can we see one or two that are sort of like them or in that price range just to compare? And by the time that happens, that person is gone and they've lost that candidate.
Hmm.
That's the risk you take if you are very overly diligent sometimes, right? There is something to be said about instinct in the hiring process. And if you fall in love, we encourage our clients to trust that instinct, generally speaking. Any
Yep,
comments
that's what
on
my recruiter peers have said the same thing. Like recruiters have supported me in hiring a team. You know, like kind of go with your gut. Is this like person the best candidate? And if you really feel like it is, you know, those have been some of the best hires I've made.
38% of all of our contractors have converted if they've started a contract since the end or the beginning of last year. It's astronomically high. 92% of those contractors accepted the offer that they received to convert. That number actually dropped from 95 to 92 because we're seeing some of our contractors get poached by other companies, because that number 241 is actually an increase. That number used to be 228. We actually saw over the summer, these last few months, people take longer to convert their contractors, and as a result, a few of them lost them. People went in and stole them from them. So that's the thing to be careful, right? As this average number of days extends, you run the risk of running into the other stat that we've been tracking, 260 days. That's the amount of time that a contractor that is not converted usually has the opportunity or is looking for the opportunity to find work elsewhere, at least over the last 12 months. So those are the most updated numbers on contractors and conversion and the timeline accordingly. One of the other things we track, Robin, and I'd love your take on this, is offer acceptance likelihood, meaning if you're the first, second, third, or more offer that a candidate receives when they're job seeking. And as you can see, it actually went up in privacy, which is fascinating because it went down in e-discovery and cybersecurity over the last few months. More likely to get a yes if you're the first offer they receive. It's now up from 70 to 75%. This is really high. We don't usually see numbers like this. It just goes to show you, at least our analysis is, we're still in a job drought. There are just not enough jobs, and candidates who are actively seeking work are more likely to say yes to a bird in the hand than they are to wait for two in the bush. Are you seeing the same thing, Robin?
I mean, I haven't really been talking to peers around this, but I think your assumption makes perfect sense. Is maybe, you know, or maybe it's just, you know, they start kind of going down the path with one opportunity and they feel really passionate about it and they're not as far with the second one. Um, so like I mean, I don't like what were you seeing during the great resignation of 2022? You were seeing just like more
Yeah, I
like
mean, you
less
can see it
likely to
right
take any.
here. Down at
Yeah.
the bottom is
Oh
less than
yeah,
half.
30%.
You had
Yep.
less than a 50% chance of getting a yes.
Hmm.
So it didn't matter as much if you were the first offer. You had to be the best offer. And best doesn't necessarily mean highest monetary amount, but best for that candidate. But you only had a 50% shot, not even if you were first. This is why when we connected
Yeah.
this chart to the speed of hire chart, those two data points become so important, because if you're thinking, hey, I got all the time in the world, I can take my time, there's not a lot of jobs out there, I can take my pick of the best. What we're saying is, well, yes and no, because the candidates are also saying there aren't that many jobs out there. So when I get an offer that's pretty good, I'm going to take it. I'm not going to necessarily wait around for 2, 3, 4 offers and then weigh them all. I'm going to go with the bird in the hand 75% of the time. And as you can see, that's a 30% increase from the great resignation. It's always better to be first. We've never seen these metrics tell us that, hey, being second or third is actually a benefit. It's always better to be first. But I think in today's market, the message we want to send hiring managers is being first is actually a competitive advantage in this marketplace versus 2 years ago, where it didn't really give you that much advantage. Now it does, right? Now it does meaningfully by, 55%, a 55% advantage. Cool. All right, we've got one more data or two more data points. So hybrid versus remote versus in office. We talked about this a little bit. The blue bars you see popping up are bars that indicate fully remote opportunities. And as you can see, the amount of fully remote opportunities that we're filling has accelerated slightly since last month, but those jobs are mostly contract positions, the ones that are fully remote. 90% of them are contract positions. So to keep in mind, if you're motivated and driven by being more remote than your current employer, that's when maybe to James's question earlier in the program, maybe you do want to consider contracting. Because if the primary motivator is being remote, the best way to get that is through contract work, because that's when people are going to give contractors a different set of permissions than they would give their full-time employees. And Robin, go ahead, jump in.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I mean, throughout my career, I've definitely been in office and remote. And I do remember like the early days of my kind of career going to the San Francisco offices and meeting people and working with people and then had other remote kind of part-time jobs where I was able to be remote a couple days a week. And then obviously COVID, I've basically been fully remote since then. And I know some of the younger generations are just kind of graduating out from college now are kind of struggling with that. Um, but I mean, I feel like I'm able to be successful in many of my peers. And I think what's nice is like, if you are fully remote, full-time organization, it is nice to at least meet your coworkers once or twice throughout the year. Cause even trying to just develop those relationships like once a year at an offsite is nice, even though it's an expense for the company. And then you kind of have that like in-person relationship that you can carry over to the Zoom.
Even our contractors wind up meeting most of the customers
Yeah,
that we support once a year. And at TRU, we've been a fully remote culture since our inception in 2010. So
right.
almost 15
You were
years.
ahead of the curve.
Well, I mean, look, some say ahead, some say we were behind. I'd like to think we were ahead only in that when the pandemic hit, we were very prepared and we were able to provide guidance and strategic leadership for our customers about how to make those transitions operationally, technically, morale, right? And one of those
Mhm.
things is you still have to make time for in person. Now we can actually do it. And we encourage people to do it, whether they're hiring contractors or FTEs. Yeah, absolutely. Last data point I want to share with everybody, motivations. You can see 21 versus 20, or it's 22 versus 23 here. Let's pop up 24. You could see burnout has essentially led for almost 12 full months now. You could see how the stack changed here, though. Innovation and buy-in went up to number 2. I think that's fascinating. Money's gone back up. I think we're feeling the pressure of inflation. Working remotely jumped back up onto the list. I think people didn't love commuting during the hot summer months, maybe. Employment was at number 2 and it dropped down to number 5. We actually saw less people getting fired in the last 30 days. But Robin, I'm interested to hear your take on this stack rank and what do you think it means to the industry?
I mean, the pace of different privacy regulations is not slowing down with all the new state laws, global laws, legislation, guidance. So I think there is like, versus if you think of privacy in 2017, when the main thing was kind of GDPR or HIPAA or GLBA, there's a lot of things coming at you. So you really need to be able to prioritize and really think about what you need to do to, mitigate the privacy risks, building privacy by design, whatever your kind of role is in privacy. um, and then on top of that, we're talking more about AI governance or responsible AI, and a lot of privacy leaders are also getting that on their plate, um, which I think at the end of the day is a good thing because there are a lot of skill sets of kind of running and rolling out a privacy program or privacy governance program that you can also apply to a responsible AI or AI ethics program. But it's just still more work to be done.
So I think it's fascinating that innovation in buying has jumped to number 2. People realize now that the ecosystem for jobs and AI or AI governance is evolving. People are curious about it. They're coming to us with curiosities
Mhm.
about it. I want to, before we ask if the audience has any final questions, I've got a final question for you. As more chief privacy officers get AI governance responsibilities, and as more jobs in privacy no longer have the word chief in the title, how important is it for leaders in privacy to hold on to the nomenclature of chief in their title in order to be successful? Or is it safe to relinquish that in exchange for getting AI in their title and moving into a new domain?
Yeah, I don't think they're two mutually distinct things. Like, I mean, I think some companies are going to continue to have chief privacy officers and they're going to designate someone that's going to be that area. Um, and there might be some companies that for example, I know of some chief privacy officers who are also getting chief privacy and responsible AI in their title. And I think it really depends on the organization, what needs to be done. If, responsible AI is also being done by the chief privacy officer, and just the general culture also around kind of titles. And, if a company feels that chief is necessary for this role or something like head of means the same thing. I think it goes back to a lot of the company.
It's an interesting point to end on because I think for job seekers, it's so personal, right?
Mhm.
And for them, it's maybe not even within their own business, but within their own career trajectory, sort of a milestone. And I think that we're going to be challenged as a community to hold on to those personal milestones in title and continue to have accelerated personal milestones in a business that needs you to expand horizontally, not vertically, in order to impact the business. So there's this dissonance that I think is exciting and something we're probably going to talk about a lot over the next couple of
Mhm.
years as things evolve. We're at the end of our half hour. We're 1 minute over. If there are any final questions, I don't see any in the channel. We're happy to take them. If you want to get in touch with Robin, you can QR her here. If you want to get in touch with me on LinkedIn, connect with us on LinkedIn, you can do so here. Robin, you've been an amazing guest host. We're so thrilled that you joined us. Thank you for your insights and all your preparation leading up to this. And I'll give you the final word to all of our wonderful listeners.
Yeah. Thanks, Jared. It was great to be on. I think my final word is one of these little tidbits I learned a long time ago, I think from the IAPP, is that, there's a lot of women in privacy. And a lot of times it was because I think it goes back to kind of privacy not being this hot topic that people want to do, is more of kind of risk and compliance. And it actually turned out that a lot of the women were kind of raising their hand to do this like boring thing in privacy and then kind of, work their way up in privacy. So I guess I would say, if you're passionate about privacy and you might have another job, like we were talking about this, or you're in privacy and you want to get more into the responsible AI governance, really think about doing that and really learning more about that area so you can kind of show a future hiring manager or your manager that you can be successful in that area by
And
doing a little
before
bit extra.
I
Yeah.
know I was going to give you the final word, but you just inspired me to say, we co-sponsored the IAPP salary survey in 2022, and it showed that the gender equilibrium between men and women in the privacy community was nearly 50-50. And not only in terms of just the sheer volume of professionals that, identified themselves as such, but also in terms of the men versus women in leadership positions and the pay scales that men and women are receiving in positions, particularly in leadership positions, is pretty equal according to this salary survey. And that to me is one of the proudest things that I think this survey came out with, because hopefully it draws more women into this business, right? And
Mhm.
that continues to be
Yep.
the statistic. So, just as you said, this is a great industry for women, and a lot of women led the charge back in the day. I don't think that's stopped. And this is a community that embraces equality and that women can feel safe and comfortable and inspired to come pursue careers where they can be treated as equals based on our research and the IAPP's research, both financially, vertically, in terms of mobility and access to opportunities. So for all those reasons, for listeners that are women that are saying, should I get into this? I just want to echo Robin's guidance and encouragement to do so, because this is a community. And it's one of the reasons we've chosen to represent this community and industry, is for all of those reasons. Sorry, I promised you the last word, but I just had to say it.
No, of course.
All right, everybody. Robin, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we'll see you again next month. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Take care.